Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here. You mentioned that the D1s, the higher levels, are starting to feel a little bit more of what you feel from year to year, which is, brand new roster or a large majority of your players coming into the program. Is culture, I imagine it's really important to you. How do you build it, and how does it drive performance with so much turnover in different bodies coming in every year?
Well, I think it's the buzzword of college athletics right now. There's those things that everybody says when somebody gets a new job. It's culture. We're going to play fast. We're going to,
it's new job bingo right there. You got it.
Play. Yeah, exactly. I think it's important. This is what I've said for a number of years now. I really, really believe this. I think a culture drives your program, and I think your relationships drive your culture. And so I think you've got to understand how you're going to create those relationships, and then how it's going to drive your culture and what you're going to believe. And so we've spent, over the years, we've spent an enormous amount of time kind of developing what we think is important to our program and what we think works in our program. And so our guys, we're trying to drive that culture through the relationships that we keep with our players every single year. And so, we got to keep getting better at that. We got to keep growing that and developing. But we really believe in that because we believe it sets the tone for our ability to be unselfish, to play together, to have good chemistry on both ends of the floor, because we believe that. And those things can drive championship teams when they're talented enough and when the guys like playing with each other and all, those things considered.
I would imagine that some schools or coaches that are used to having players around for 3 or 4 years, and more of that, slow cooker way of having culture grow. It's just always been this way. We have younger players that watch older players, and they learn, and then those younger players become older, and they in turn teach. But now, if culture isn't something that is important to you, or that you believe in and that you're teaching, I would imagine it's harder now. And you kind of alluded to it earlier, these 15 and 15 teams that just they seem to don't gel or believe in what the overall mission is. You got to be really intentional now, right?
Yeah, you do. You have to be intentional. You got to look at it from both sides. I've had a unique perspective for 23 years because, like I tell people, I have a built-in clinic every year if I want one, because I have so many Division I guys that come through our gym to recruit. If I want to throw a topic out like defensive rebounding, or if I want a defensive transition, I've got an unlimited source of people that I can say, hey, you have to talk basketball when you come in to recruit our teams. Well, I also do that with how people recruit our players and their recruiting philosophies. I do that with their culture and how they run their programs. Culture leaks. Your culture will leak every single day. So if you've got a kid around for 3 or 4 years, how do you keep your culture fresh? Because that kid could get bored with your culture too, which is why you're seeing some of this transfer portal stuff. So I think the balance that you've got to find as a coach is, how do I create a culture every year that keeps people excited about what they're doing? And if you're at a blue blood, let's face it, it's easy.
Yeah.
Those guys aren't having that same culture problem because of what they're playing for every year and what the expectation is, and the amount of fans that sit in the stands and the pride of the school and all those things combined. But if you're at a general school, you've got to balance that stuff. You've got to find a way to keep things fresh. You've got to find a way to help develop culture. And I think the way you do that, to answer the question I'm bringing up, is that you've got to grow leaders. You've got to grow guys that in their first 2 years they're learning, and then in their last 2 years they're leading, and they're becoming the guys that are teaching it. And the
Mm,
greatest programs that we've seen, I think that's what you watch the most of. Now with the portal, how do you do that? Because they're not going to be there those last 2 years because they're going somewhere else.
yeah.
The turnover is a lot more. Your culture is going to look a little different. It's going to feel a little bit different, I believe, and it's going to be interesting to see how that matures. I think we're all dealing with it right now, and I think that's why you're seeing the records that you've seen this year while these coaches adapt a little bit.
Yeah. And I think every coach would say they understand that culture is important and that it does ultimately lead to winning and success. You know, the better that you have, the more chances or opportunities. But I think now the challenge is, like you, to your point, when a kid comes into a blue blood, they don't really care about the culture because they know what they're going to get out of just being in that program. Well, now culture is more important than ever. How can we make our players understand that it's going to benefit them individually, being a part of that and learning it? That's like the secret sauce, because instead of just, guys, listen, this is our culture, do it or else go somewhere else. They'll go somewhere else. So,
Yeah,
hey, this is our culture, and this is how it benefits you individually. So then I think it makes us as coaches reevaluate our culture, like take it down to the individual level, but knowing that if we build them up like this, it'll still spread and ultimately help our overall theme of winning.
yeah, I agree. I agree.
Hard to do though, because I think in the past, like to me, culture has always been these kind of selfless ideas that if it's countercultural, a lot of the things like selflessness, humility, all these things. Like if your culture is you're going to be a millionaire, well, sign me up. Like I
Yeah,
can't wait for that. But what if
yeah,
it's something else? Like I don't know. I think that's the challenge.
I think so. I think the culture becomes at our level. The culture is, what do you want? So if you look at me and you tell me
Yeah,
you want to be a mid-major Division I player, well, here's the mid-major Division I standards. If you're not going to live up to those standards, then you can't tell me you want to be a mid-major player. And so I think everything is not. I don't know if everything is the right word. There's most things in our business that are uh, performance driven. You've
yeah,
got to perform to get, whether it's going to be NIL money or whether it's going to be the scholarships or whether it's championships. I mean, that all that stuff is performance driven. And so I think a lot of these young men, since we're talking about men's basketball that are coming out, you can talk about women also, but all these people that are coming out of high school right now and coming out of COVID and had a couple years where they weren't taught or they weren't taught in person. They weren't
yeah.
in class. They weren't in front of their coach every day. Those people don't. They're not as performance driven as they once were, and
Hmm.
we're having to help them learn how to be performance driven. And there we go back to my philosophy of you're in college to learn how to learn. You're not in college to regurgitate information. And it's one of the core elements of who we are is that you have to learn how to learn. And so that's just, we talk about it all the time.
And I don't know if this is already happening, but it would make sense if I was a D1 coach or at any different level trying to navigate my way through what the landscape looks like today. I'd be reaching out to guys like you that you've been doing this for years. Like this isn't new to you.
Yeah.
The fact that every year we've got a lot of new bodies in. So yeah, you've already been experimenting and figuring out how do we get these guys in this amount of time to buy in and play. It just makes sense to reach out to guys like you.
Well, I think I don't disagree with that, and I think you'll see more, maybe more junior college coaches on staffs at the Division I level. Um, some of that stuff. I think some of the things I like. I try to tell coaches a lot that are coming. Half of being real, and maybe half's not right, but half of being successful is knowing what not to do, not
Mm,
just what to do. And so if you can find somebody on your staff or that's been through culture or been through the recruiting process, and you can eliminate some of the work and say, look, this isn't going to work. That's as beneficial to you as saying, look, I've got 10 ideas that are going to work. Because you got to know what's going to fail. You got to know the things that don't work. And when you get past that stuff, then you put yourself on a faster growth plan.
If it's so important for us to have dynamic, and again, cultures, you could substitute that word: standards, pillars, ways that you show up. That's just the buzzword. But
Yes.
what's one of your favorite activities or multiple activities, because you mentioned life circles and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
to build your culture up?
We do a personality trait deal with our guys that's really, really good. Um, of course, we've stole it. It's not something that we created, and we've borrowed it and we use it. But early in the year, every year, I'll sit down with our team, and we're fortunate we can bring our guys in July. So we don't do it in July when they're here, but shortly after the season in August, when we get back and start school, late August, early September, we'll sit them down and we'll do this little personality inventory, and we'll have them do it on themselves, and then we start talking about putting everybody into a category, me included, the assistant coaches, everybody that's in the room, and we start talking about the different personalities that are out there and how to interact with those type personalities and how they receive information the best. And so I really like it because it lets me look at this kid across the room from me and go, oh man, he's not me. He's totally different than I am. And whether it's an international kid that has different morals and a different, maybe he's Muslim. We've had Muslims on our team, and so it just helps them. I try to identify that, and ultimately down the road we treat each other differently, or not. Difference, not the word. We treat each other appropriately to what you receive best, and it really helps me. I'm a personality guy. I think I've told you that. I want to have good relationships. We believe relationships drive our culture. I meet with our team, our scholarship guys, every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of every week. So I filter through our
Wow.
entire team once every 2 weeks. I do two guys Tuesday, two guys Wednesday, two guys Thursday, and then I do the other six the next week. And so I filter through our team. So you meet with me for 30 minutes once every 2 weeks at least. And during that stretch of time, we talk about a lot of things. We talk about, of course, basketball is going to come up, but I don't want to keep it about basketball. We talk about families, we talk about academics, we talk about, you know, I stole this one time. I'll ask them one time throughout the year. I'll say, hey, what do you want Christmas to look like when you're 30 years old and you're married and you got two kids? Because they don't know. They look at you like you're crazy. They
Yeah.
look at you like, oh, Coach, I didn't even thought, but I want you to think about that. Because if you're not aspiring to be to that person, if you're not thinking about that a little bit, then how are you growing? Why are you're not growing at the rate you want to grow? And so I just think, and I don't beat it up. We don't spend a lot of time on it, but I just throw it at them because I want to challenge them with a different thought process, a different learning environment, and and those rooms, when they're in the room with me during that time, it's their safe space with me. They can ask me any question they want. They can talk about basketball. They can, why am I not playing more? It gives them room to visit with me about things that are on their mind. And then we always end it the same way. And I just tell them, how can I help you? What can I do to make things better? And if they don't hear those things, if the only time they ever spend time with me is between the blue lines at practice every day, then we're a very challenging basketball program. We're trying to play at a very elite level, and so everything is competitive at practice, and so all they see is a competitive personality, and they don't necessarily get to know the person.
Yeah, only a small part of the relationship can really be built between those blue lines. Like a small part. It's going to be very transactional at
Yeah.
that practice, but then you can fill in those gaps or the larger part by those meetings. And man, just want to, I really appreciate how intentional you are. That's 30 minutes with each guy, over those two
Yeah.
weeks, and then cycling through. Golly, the compound effect of that throughout the season. That's a lot of valuable time where I imagine you probably sidestep a lot of landmines because the conversation, like a lot of times when frustration really builds up, it's been happening for a long period of time and finally erupts at the
Mm-hmm.
worst moment. Well,
Mm-hmm.
by those constant conversations through and allowing them to ask questions, you probably get to sidestep a lot of those
We hope so. That's
or
part of that's
prevent.
part of
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We're trying to, we're wanting to get to that point where, they're able to do that. This year's team was a little difficult. I really struggled to connect with this team.
Hmm.
We still won 21 games. We had a good year on the court, but I found myself having to work really hard with some of this group, and that's been interesting because we're coming off two back-to-back championships and a 31 win season, and so you kind of have this feeling that let's go, everything's going to keep rolling.
Everything's rolling. Yeah.
And we had a group of freshmen this year that it just was a little more difficult than it has been in the past, and that happens. I mean, it's going to be that way. We'll learn from it, all of us, me included. I mean, I've got some things that I've written down that I'm going to really work on in May and June this year, and try to beef up the life circle and beef up those individual meetings that can help me navigate and work with those guys, especially these COVID kids that are still coming out of high school. I just think they've been very, very, they've been allowed to be very, very selfish. And I don't try to say that in a negative way, other than they just haven't been demanded to branch out a whole lot.
Hmm.
And so I'm not trying to say that they're selfish because they've chosen to be. I think they're selfish because of the environment that they've been in. And so we're going to have to try to help pull some of that out of them.
Hmm. That's a great reminder too, that as coaches to be careful just to assume that past success, past culture, past relationships means that next year's is going to be identical to that, or we're just going to be able to almost go 2.0 with this thing.
Yeah.
Blind carbon copy.
Right.
The coach at Jesuit, Chris Hill, had a great reminder. He's just said he starts every season as if it's brand new.
Mm-hmm.
Brand new relationships. We got to put culture in again, but then to your point, I think you can kind of blend that with what you said but still keep it fresh and new. And because you're right, the moment that you think that you've arrived in anything, culture, training, or diets, you can relax and pause, you're already moving the opposite direction. But I thank you for that reminder.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.